What's up? Welcome to the Stand Up and Shout Rock Show. We're coming at you live from the Salisbury Center Studios in Manassas, Virginia on the Wylde Style Network powered by Monster Energy. I'm Kev, joined by my bud Wisk. How's it going?
Happy Good Friday to you, Kevin.
Good Friday it is.
Yes, sir. Wait, and I got to pause before we get going because there's a lot of love to give on this Good Friday, and I think I'm going to be giving it to a lot of people in a lot of places. And I'm going to start with you, my friend, because this is, as you're smiling and you know what I'm about to bring up. You're going through a very, very big family celebratory event. Your son, Jake Birch, who has great, fantastic taste in rock music.
He does.
Getting married tomorrow.
He is. Yep. We had the rehearsal early this morning and a little brunch afterwards. And then I shot over here so that we can do this show and talk to the bands that are playing tonight.
You are dedicated, dude. You are fully dedicated because you're leaving here and then rehearsing, dinnering still, family, getting ready.
Out, family
exactly.
stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
But going to catch a little bit of the show. So thank you.
No doubt.
So, another episode. Here we go. And, tonight the band actually stopped. So we're here because, as usual, we try to host when there's live music.
Live music is what it's all about.
Yes, sir. And we've got 3 bands tonight, headlined by This, That, and the Other. And we're going to have them in the studio in a little bit.
Can't wait.
Medicine Man and First Try.
Can't wait. Yes.
And I'm missing a little makeup compared to you.
Obviously, I'm in First Try, so I'm usually makeuped out. I got it was a little chaotic and confusing before when I did this last time, and you called me Cindy Brady, not because of the makeup, just because I was so confused and lost when I was trying to talk through all of this. Right. I was trying to head it off at the pass. So you got me a little makeup during the podcast.
All right. Well, maybe I'll get a little rouge, a little rouge, and maybe I'll, get some extensions or something. I don't know. But kind of kicking things off, there's a lot going on in the world of music right now, and we've got our own version of the Real Housewives of the Sunset Strip happening.
Motley Crue lit it up, baby. Over the past 24 hours, I think it lit up our text communication back and forth, at least over the last 12 hours. And before we kick into that, though, you just heard the voice of Jeff Salisbury, who we did not hear on Punk Rock Night. So it is very nice to have Jeff Salisbury back chiming into the conversation.
Good to be back.
Yes.
Good to see you, brother.
Yeah. So, yesterday broke news that Mick Mars, there's been a little bit of kind of back and forth. It was they announced he was leaving the band or leaving as a touring member of Motley Crue.
Yeah.
Replaced by John 5. And then, now they're back out on the road. But then all of a sudden you started hearing things eking out about why he left.
Sure. And that initial announcement was a little sketchy, right? And because when you think of, Motley Crue, I feel like they've had their ins and outs over the years, but ultimately it's been about those 4. And it's never been about Mick when it wasn't about those 4. Right. He's been like a bedrock, of Motley Crue in many ways. I think many ways we're going to talk about.
Right.
But just in terms of knowing that he's there, you always could rely on Mick being there. So I think that initial announcement that he was leaving was tremendous shock. I know to me and to you, to Jeff Salisbury, because I know that we're all tremendous Motley Crue fans and we can't get enough of them, which is why we're talking about them even now, because if it was just some lesser band, we wouldn't give a shit and we would just be moving on talking about something else.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think Scott's going to throw it up, but there was an article that broke yesterday announcing that he was suing them. I guess, it reads that he was basically gaslighted and pushed out of the band, and he's trying to recoup money that he's supposedly due.
Because he's due a quarter. And it seemed like it was a all for one for all kind of approach, right? That 25%, 4 people, 100%, you do the math, it's pretty easy. Come down to 25%. Mick being that bedrock, and all of a sudden he's pushed away from that 25%.
Right.
That's the number, that's the suit.
Right.
I think at its basics.
Yep. And then very quickly, Motley Crue then issued a statement about, how he was wrong, and that, really kind of started slamming him on his performance and what he was not capable of doing. And in not so nice terms at the beginning said, he announced he was resigning, but sort of towards the end of that article, it's like, oh, we got rid of him.
Right.
So it's like, which one was it?
Right. Which is almost going back. And I feel like this whole story, which is why I think it's blown up in the hard rock metal community, is because it hits at a lot of all of the debate over Motley Crue and the controversy that they could draw out over the years. And so, of course, that is it. What is the actual story? Like, I don't feel, if you can listen to still 2 stories about the Vince Neil,
Right.
Travesty or whatever you would call it, like him leaving, coming in and out. You don't know if he resigned, if he was thrown out. Depends who you talk to on what given day. And this feels a lot to me to be the same type of thing.
Right. Well, and to me, it's getting real personal and out in the open.
Yes.
You assumed in the past there were differences between Vince and Tommy and Vince and Nikki, but like you said, Mick was always that bedrock and was just there. And but for them to now be kind of dinging on him, he's claiming, they weren't playing the music live, backing tracks, and
which hits at a bigger issue, right? We talked about that on a past podcast with Wasp specifically. Then, I think that came to light in a lot of news media. And with this, then, what are we seeing when we see a Motley Crue show? And I think that we've discussed that, not even on this podcast, but in and amongst our friends, with ourselves all the time. Like, what are we seeing when we see an actual show, and how much of that is Motley Crue? And then as Motley Crue ages, the group ages, what are they relying on to get through the shows? And we've seen different levels of I don't want to say professionalism, because I think that's the bad word, I guess, of musicianship, along the way in terms of backing tracks, what they're playing, the notes they hit versus what they used to hit. And that's just been the cause of a lot of discussion as to whether or not you would actually even attend the show.
Right. Well, and maybe that's it. I mean, I know me personally, and we've had these conversations, I'm not expecting it to be pristine album quality.
Right.
And knowing over the years, we've been to Crue shows where Vince was just not good, and a lot of it was related to his age and health. But that was fine because it was Motley Crue.
Right.
But, and then I think the third article I think Scott's going to bring up here is really kind of evident that it's going to get really nasty and personal, where Mick, the quote is, "I carried those bastards for years."
Right.
So
questioning their musicianship.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's, this seems to be much more personal and much more out in the public than their previous issues that they've had. So to me, makes me a little sad.
Right.
Because obviously, we've been listening to them since the early 80s, and this is probably it. They're done.
That's what I get back to. That's why we're talking about it, because I love this band so much. For me personally, they were my first love. That I think that if you really kind of like dive into music and appreciate music and love it as much as we do, you can remember certain moments in the beginning that drew you to that. And Shout at the Devil was an album for me like that. That was something that made me fall into not only this music scene, but just music in general, and how much you can like really connect and appreciate emotionally with an album. And so I always want to see the Crue. I don't want to see it go away. I don't want to see mom and dad fight. I want to see them get together.
Mom and dad got divorced.
Exactly.
And this is going to be an ugly divorce, and the kids are the ones that are going to bear the brunt.
Yes.
And that's us and the fans.
But get into Mick, to me, I don't only think that he's an unsung hero of Motley Crue. I also think he's an unsung hero in the guitar world. I've seen other people speak that way too. He's always been rock solid. His performance has always been rock solid. I love the soloing that he does on many tracks. I've always loved seeing him live. He may not necessarily have the same stage flair as other members of that group, but he was a bedstone. He was a corner. And you were asking me about that because I saw them in one of their first shows with John 5 in Atlantic City. And of course, his musicianship was stellar, but it doesn't have the same feel. To get to that Dave Grohl kind of, I think he really pushes feel between people and members and people playing together. And it doesn't feel the same. Not that it feels bad, it just feels different. And I think that that's always going to be missed without those 4 members together and the original members of Motley Crue.
But even with feel, could you imagine somebody with feel and talent and pizzazz like Slash or Tracy Guns being in that band?
Yes.
He had to be there, the rock solid, because everybody else was out of control.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah. And the feel, it's a lot like one of our other favorite bands with Kicks, with Ronnie 1010 not being in the band. There's they're great. They put on a phenomenal live show still, and Bob Paré is a great guitar player. It's just not the same.
I miss Ronnie. To me, he's gritty. I miss his grit, in that kick sound. You can feel the dirt, like when he plays, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, I guess more to come on how this is going to go, and we'll talk about it as new information comes out. But I think we're going to kick it to a break here, and then I'm going to
take the bottom line. The bottom line: give Mick his money. He shouldn't be reduced. I was reading in these articles they want to reduce his basically payout to 7.5%, eventually to 5%. Mick is one of the quarters. He deserves his quarter. I think he's over the years. I think that these articles pointed out 41 years was the number they gave. He deserves it, but ultimately, mom and dad need to get back together and keep touring, and in whatever capacity they can, because I still recommend Motley shows. No matter whatever nuances that you may nitpick out, it's still a fantastic live show.
Agreed. Yeah. All right, we're going to kick it to break. We're going to come back, and we're going to have the guys from First Try here in the studio with us. You're watching and listening to the Stand Up and Shout Rock Show on the Wylde Style Network.